The night sky above the ruined valley was heavy and silent. Smoke still curled from broken towers in the distance. Once this place had been a city full of music, trade, and families. Now it was nothing more than cracked stone, rusted machines, and empty shadows. The war had ended, but the scars of it remained on every wall and every road. In the center of this silence, a human ship descended slowly. Its silver hull reflected the pale light of the shattered moon. The sound of its engines echoed through the valley like a warning. Dust lifted in spirals as the craft landed. Then the ramp lowered, and a single man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a simple work jacket, his hands marked with grease and scars. He was not a soldier now, not anymore. He had been sent only as a mechanic, part of a supply mission, ordered to check if any survivors still lived in this forgotten zone. He did not expect to find anyone. Most believed the place was dead. But in the ruins of an abandoned home, a pair of frightened eyes watched him. A widow, thin and tired, crouched in the darkness with her 2 children. Their stomachs were empty. Their faces were pale. They had been hiding for weeks, living on scraps, afraid to move. The sight of the human ship had filled the mother with terror, but also with hope. She whispered to her children. They clung to her arms, shaking their heads, too afraid to leave their hiding place. She kissed their foreheads and stood. With weak steps, she walked toward the sound of boots on stone. The man noticed her before she spoke. She was tall, though her shoulders bent with sorrow. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, the mark of her alien blood. Her clothes were torn, and her hands trembled. Behind her, the children followed, clutching her dress as if it were their only anchor. The human raised his hand, cautious but calm. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "It is dangerous. Why did you come out?" The widow lowered her head. Her voice cracked as she spoke, each word pulled from a heart heavy with shame. "Because I have no choice. My children have no father. My people will not protect us. You are the only one who can." The man frowned, confused. He thought she wanted food or water, but then she fell to her knees before him. The children hid their faces against her sides. Tears ran down her cheeks as she looked up at the human. "Please," she whispered, "take me as your wife. Take my children as your own. If you leave us, we will die." The human froze. Her words struck him harder than the silence of the ruined city. He had expected to hear begging for food, for medicine, or for transport off the world. But this was different. She was offering her life. She was offering her children's lives. She was begging for a bond no stranger should be asked to accept. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Only the wind carried the ashes across the stone ground. The widow pressed her forehead to the earth. Her voice was thin, but her desperation filled the air like thunder. "Predators come in the night. They hunt widows. They steal children. My family is hunted already. A human husband will protect us. You are strong. They fear you. Without you, my children will not live another week." The man looked at the 2 small faces peeking from behind her arms. Their eyes were wide, shining with hunger and hope. He had seen death before. He had seen families broken. But this was different. This was a plea that reached deep into his chest and twisted something inside him. He wanted to turn away. He wanted to say no. This was not his mission. He was not here to take a bride. He was not here to play father. Yet the way she trembled, the way her children clung to her, made the words catch in his throat. The ship behind him hummed quietly, waiting for him to return. But his feet felt heavy, as if the earth itself wanted him to stay. The widow raised her head once more. Her tears caught the faint light of the stars. Her lips moved with one last plea. "If you walk away, we are already dead." Her voice broke. The children began to cry, pressing their faces into her chest. The human's hands clenched. His breath grew slow. For the first time since he had landed, he felt something heavier than duty pressing on his shoulders. He did not know if this was fate, or if it was a cruel accident. But he knew one thing. He had stumbled into a moment that would decide not only their lives, but perhaps his own. The valley was silent again, waiting for his answer. The human man stood frozen, his shadow stretched across the broken ground. The widow's words echoed in his mind. She had begged him to take her as his wife. It was not something he could laugh away. It was not something he could dismiss as madness. It was desperate. It was real. He looked down at her, kneeling with her children pressed against her sides. They were shaking, but they did not let go of her. Their trust in her was unshaken, though their trust in him was still uncertain. He felt their eyes on him, as if they were weighing his soul. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He had fought in battles before. He had walked through fire and steel. Yet this, the sight of a mother and her children begging for his protection, made his chest heavy. He had never been asked for something so deep, so permanent, and so binding. "You do not know me," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "I am a stranger. Why would you place your life in my hands?" The widow lifted her face. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with quiet strength. "Because strangers are safer than enemies," she answered. "And because my people have already turned their backs. You are human. They fear you. That is enough to keep us alive." The man clenched his jaw. He wanted to tell her that she was wrong. He wanted to tell her that he was no hero, no savior, only a mechanic who fixed ships and engines. But when he looked at the children, he felt the words die. They were thin, their cheeks hollow. The little girl's dress was torn. The boy's shoes had holes. They had nothing, not even hope, except for this plea. Inside his heart, two voices battled. One told him to walk away, to return to his ship, to complete his mission and leave this broken world behind. The other voice, softer but stronger, whispered that he could not. Not when 3 lives were tied to his choice. He turned his head and looked around the ruins. Shadows stretched between the fallen walls. He thought of her warning. Predators, hunters, those who sold widows and children like goods. The thought filled him with quiet rage. He imagined them creeping closer even now, waiting for him to leave. The widow spoke again, her voice trembling, but firm. "You think I ask this because I want it. I do not. I ask because I must. If I walk back into those ruins without your protection, I will be taken. My children will be taken. I would rather beg you than let them suffer." Her words cut through the silence. They wrapped around his heart like chains. He felt the weight of her shame, but also the fire of her courage. It was not easy for her to say these things. But a mother's love was stronger than pride. The man's hands curled into fists. He thought of the life he had before the war. A life where choices were simple. Fix the engine. Deliver the goods. Do the job. But here, in this ruined valley, there were no simple choices. Only life or death. The children moved closer. The boy tugged at his sleeve, his small fingers trembling. The girl whispered in a weak voice, "Please do not leave us." The man's chest tightened. He closed his eyes, taking in the sound of their fragile voices. For a moment, he wished he were cold and heartless. Then the decision would be easy. But he was not. He was human. And humans carried the burden of compassion. He stepped back, his boots scraping against the stone. The widow lowered her head again, fearing his answer. But instead of leaving, he crouched down. His eyes met the children's eyes. He did not speak, but the silence between them was stronger than words. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a broken toy. A small carved figure, its head cracked, its paint faded. He placed it in the man's hand without a word. The gift was worthless to the world, but priceless to the boy. The human stared at it, his throat tight. He realized then that he was not being asked for charity. He was being asked for family. A bond stronger than food or safety. A promise that would mark the rest of his life. He rose slowly, his mind still torn. He could not answer yet. Not here. Not now. But he knew one thing. He could not simply walk away. Something inside him refused to let him. The night grew colder. The wind carried the cries of distant creatures. The ruins whispered with danger. The man knew he had little time to decide. Every second brought the hunters closer. Every second the widow and her children remained unclaimed was another chance for death to find them. His heart pounded as he looked at the stars. Was this fate? Was he chosen for this moment, or had he simply stumbled into it? He did not know. But as he looked at the widow and her children, he felt a truth burning inside him. The truth was simple. If he left them now, their blood would be on his hands. And that was something he could not live with. The human man stood in silence. The gift of the broken toy still rested in his palm. The children's small faces looked at him with quiet hope. He wanted to ask why this widow had chosen him, why she had begged so desperately. But the answer came before he spoke. The widow straightened her back, though her body was weak. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew steady, as if speaking her pain gave her strength. "You must understand," she said softly. "Before the war, I had a husband. He was strong, proud, and kind. He believed he could protect us from everything. But he was called to fight, and he never returned." The man lowered his eyes. He had seen too many fall in the war. Brave ones. Gentle ones. Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. The battlefield did not care for dreams. The widow's fingers touched the heads of her children. They pressed closer to her, listening as if they too needed to hear her story told aloud. "When the war ended, my people did not welcome us. They said we were a burden. A widow has no power. A widow with children is a curse. Families closed their doors to me. Friends I once trusted walked away." Her words were heavy. Each one seemed to hang in the air like stones. The human man felt them pressing on his heart. "I tried to work," she continued, her voice shaking. "But the markets refused me. I had no husband's name to protect me. My hands grew tired. My children grew thin. When we begged, they gave us scraps, then pushed us aside. Soon the shadows began to follow us. Men who trade in flesh. Men who steal children. They watch, waiting for us to fall." The human clenched his jaw. The thought of such men made his blood heat. He had heard whispers of these dark trades. But hearing her speak of it so directly made the whispers real. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her eyes were fierce. "I fled with my children into the ruins. I thought the dead city would hide us. But even here, I hear them at night. Their footsteps. Their laughter. They know we are weak. Every night I hold my children close and pray they do not find us." Her son buried his face against her side. Her daughter gripped her hand. The human could see the fear in their small bodies, fear carved into them by nights of listening to footsteps in the dark. The widow looked up at him again, her voice breaking but clear. "I begged you because I have nothing left. I would sell my pride, my name, even my life if it means my children will live. I would rather be your wife, even as a stranger, than be taken by them. Do you understand?" The man felt his throat tighten. He did understand. He understood too well. Her plea was not born of romance. It was born of survival. A mother's love had driven her to this point. And that love was stronger than shame, stronger than fear, stronger even than death. The widow bowed her head once more. Her tears fell onto the dusty stones. "I know you are a stranger. I know this is madness. But I have no one else. If you walk away, there is no tomorrow for us." The man stood frozen. Her story cut deep into him. He remembered the men he had buried, the families left behind. He remembered children crying at graves, wives waiting for letters that never came. He thought of how many widows must still wander broken worlds, forgotten by those who swore to protect them. But this was not just another widow. This was not just another story. This one had walked into his life, placed her fate in his hands, and asked him to decide. The children's eyes lifted to him once more. The boy's lips trembled. The girl clutched her toyless fingers together. They did not speak, but their silence screamed louder than any words. The human felt the broken toy pressing into his palm. It was small, fragile, and almost worthless. Yet in that moment, it was a treasure greater than gold. It was trust. It was hope. It was a child's way of saying, "You are our only chance." The night deepened. The wind carried the faint howl of distant predators. The ruins creaked as if the stones themselves were listening. The man drew a long breath, feeling the weight of her story settle upon him. He still had no answer. His heart was torn. But one thing was clear. He could never forget the story she had told him. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that if he turned his back now, her story would end in tragedy. The ruins were quiet, but the silence carried weight. The human man still stood torn between choice and fear. The widow's story clung to him like chains, and yet it was not her words alone that pressed into his heart. It was the children. Their small faces. Their fragile trust. Their unspoken plea for a father. The boy was the first to move. His little hands shook as he stepped forward. His mother tried to hold him back, but he slipped from her grasp. He looked at the human man with wide eyes, uncertain but determined. In his hand, he held something small. It was the broken toy again. The one he had given before. But now the boy pressed it back into the human's palm with greater force, as if demanding that he take it. His lips trembled, and when he spoke, his voice was thin and cracked. "This is all I have. If you keep it, you will not leave." The human froze. He had thought the toy a simple gift, but now he understood. To the boy, it was more than a toy. It was a bond. A promise. A thread tying the man to them. The girl moved next. She was younger, her hair tangled, her dress torn from nights spent hiding. She stepped close, her small fingers tugging gently at the human's jacket. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was soft and innocent. "Are you kind? My mother says humans are kind. Will you be kind to us?" The question pierced him deeper than any weapon ever had. He had seen war, and he had seen death, but never had anyone looked at him with such pure hope. It was not hope for riches. Not hope for glory. It was hope for a hand to hold. Hope for warmth. Hope for family. The widow watched, her body trembling. She had begged, but now it was her children who spoke. Their innocence was sharper than her sorrow. They were too young to hide their feelings. Too young to lie. Their honesty burned like light in the darkness. The human crouched down, his knees pressing against the cracked stone. He looked at the boy and girl at eye level. For a moment, he could not speak. His throat felt tight, and his chest ached with the weight of their trust. The boy stared at him with unblinking eyes. His little hands clenched as if holding courage he did not have. He whispered again, "Please stay. If you leave, they will take us." The girl leaned against her brother. She whispered, "We will be good. We will not trouble you." The man reached out slowly. His hand hovered above their heads but did not touch. He was afraid. Not of them, but of what this choice meant. To place his hand upon them was not a simple gesture. It was a vow. And vows carried weight heavier than stone. He looked at their mother. Her eyes shone with tears she did not dare let fall. She did not speak, but he could see it in her face. She was begging without words now. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the ruins, a rock tumbled, broken loose by unseen footsteps. The man's head lifted sharply. He knew danger was near. He knew that eyes might already be watching. The hunters, the predators, the ones who waited for weakness, they would not wait forever. He clenched the toy in his hand, its sharp edges pressing into his skin. He could not turn away. He knew it now with bitter certainty. The children had broken the wall around his heart. Their innocence had done what the widow's sorrow could not. It had forced him to feel, not as a soldier or as a mechanic, but as a man. The girl's small fingers tugged again at his jacket. "Are you kind?" she whispered once more, softer this time. The man's chest rose and fell with a heavy breath. He nodded slowly. His voice came out low, rough, but true. "Yes. I will be kind." The widow gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand, her body shaking with relief. Her children clung to the human, their faces pressed against his chest as if they had known him all their lives. He closed his eyes. He knew he had not yet spoken the final words. He had not yet claimed them as his family. But in this moment, under the ruined sky, a bond had already been formed. The boy whispered against him, "Then you are our father now." The words struck like thunder. They were innocent, unplanned, pure. But once spoken, they could not be undone. The human man opened his eyes to the night sky. The stars shone faintly through the drifting smoke. He felt the weight of the toy in his hand. He felt the small bodies pressed against him. He felt the widow's eyes upon him, full of hope, fear, and love unspoken. And he knew. Whether he spoke it aloud or not, he was already theirs. The ruins groaned under the weight of the night. Broken walls cast long shadows that twisted with the wind. The human man stood among them, the widow at his side, her children pressed against him as if he were already their shield. He felt the weight of their tiny bodies, their trust, their hope, and he knew the moment of choice had come. The air grew colder. The silence was not empty anymore. It was thick, alive, heavy with unseen movement. Somewhere in the distance, a stone cracked. Then came a low laugh, carried by the wind. It was not the laugh of joy. It was the laugh of hunters. The widow's eyes widened. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "They are here." The man's blood surged. His instincts sharpened, the way they had in the war. He turned, scanning the shadows. Figures moved in the dark, faint but real. Their steps were slow, deliberate, meant to frighten. They wanted their prey to panic. The widow pulled her children close. Her voice cracked with fear. "They wait for us to be alone. They wait for me to have no protector. If you leave now, they will take us before the dawn." The man clenched his fists. He had told himself he was only a mechanic. He had told himself this was not his fight. But as the laughter echoed closer, he knew those words were lies. He could not step back. Not now. He reached into his jacket and pulled free the small tool he always carried, a heavy spanner, simple but strong. It was not a soldier's weapon, but it was enough in his hands. The hunters stepped closer. He could see their eyes now, glinting in the faint moonlight. There were 3 of them, tall and cruel, their faces marked by scars. They whispered to one another, mocking, certain of their victory. One of them called out, his voice rough and sharp, "Widow! You should have stayed hidden. Now you belong to us." The widow's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her children behind her, her body shaking but unyielding. The man stepped forward, placing himself between them and the hunters. His voice came out calm, low, and heavy with resolve. "She is mine. Her children are mine. If you want them, you will have to go through me." The hunters stopped. Their laughter broke into silence. They looked at one another, surprised by the boldness of a human standing alone. For a heartbeat, the night held still. Then one of them hissed, his lips curling into a sneer. "You claim her? You claim the cursed widow? Then you will die with her." They moved. The man gripped his spanner tighter. His heart pounded, but his stance was steady. He had fought greater numbers before. He had survived worse odds. But this fight was different. This was not for a flag or for orders. This was for a mother and her children. The widow gasped behind him, her voice breaking. "They will not stop. They will kill you." The man turned his head slightly. His eyes met hers in the dim light. His words came out strong, each one like stone. "Not while I stand." The hunters hesitated again. They had expected fear. They had expected pleading. But what they saw was a man ready to die before he surrendered what he had claimed. And something in that made them pause. Humans were dangerous. Everyone knew that. A desperate human even more so. The leader of the hunters spat on the ground. His sneer faltered. He growled, then gave a sharp signal with his hand. Slowly, they stepped back, their eyes still fixed on the man. "This is not over," one of them snarled. "We will return. A human cannot guard them forever. The man stood his ground, silent, unyielding. He did not lower his weapon until the shadows swallowed them again, and their footsteps faded into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy. The widow fell to her knees, her tears flowing freely. She covered her mouth to stifle her sobs. Her children clung to the man's legs, their tiny hands gripping him as if they would never let go. He lowered his spanner and knelt beside them. His hands, scarred and strong, touched the children's shoulders gently. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of his choice. They are gone for now. But hear me. You are not alone anymore. From this night forward, you are my family. The widow looked at him, her face streaked with tears. For a moment she could not speak. Then she bowed her head to the ground, her body trembling with relief and gratitude. You saved us. You saved everything I have left. The man shook his head. His eyes were on the children, their faces pressed against him. No. You saved me. You gave me something worth fighting for again. Above them, the stars shone faintly through the broken sky. The night was still dangerous, but hope had been born. And with his decision, the bond between human and alien widow was no longer a plea. It was a promise. Morning light spilled gently across the valley. The ruins that once looked cold and cruel now glowed with faint warmth as the sun climbed above the broken towers. Smoke no longer curled from the ground, and for the first time in many nights, the widow's children slept without fear. The human man rose early. His hands, rough from years of work, found purpose again. He gathered pieces of scrap metal and wood from the ruins. He worked with quiet focus, the same way he once worked on engines and ships. Sparks flew as he hammered, shaped, and repaired. The children woke to the sound of tools striking stone. Their eyes widened as they saw him building. He was fixing the collapsed wall near their shelter. He was patching holes, creating safety where there had been none. The little boy whispered to his sister, "He is making our home." Their mother stood nearby, her heart tight with wonder. She had begged him for protection, but she had not expected this. He was not only guarding them. He was rebuilding what they had lost. When he paused, wiping sweat from his brow, the girl carried water to him in a small cracked cup. He smiled and accepted it. She giggled softly, her face lighting up in a way her mother had not seen in months. Later, the man showed the children how to stack stones, how to fit wood across the cracks. Their small hands struggled, but he guided them patiently, never raising his voice. Each time they succeeded, he praised them. Each time they failed, he helped them try again. By evening, the shelter looked different. Stronger. Warmer. The wind no longer cut through the broken walls. The fire burned steady in the center. The children huddled near it, laughter echoing softly between the stone. The widow sat across from the man, her eyes fixed on him. She watched the way her children leaned on him, the way he listened to their endless questions, the way his smile seemed to come more easily now. Slowly, her heart softened. This stranger was becoming more than a protector. He was becoming the center of their little world. That night, she prepared a simple meal. Bread baked from scraps of grain. A stew made from roots she had hidden. It was meager, but she offered it with care. The man accepted without complaint, eating slowly, thanking her as if it were a feast. The children whispered stories as they ate. Tales of their father who had once carried them on his shoulders. Tales of games they used to play before the war. Their voices were full of innocence again, not only fear. The man listened with respect, his eyes soft, his hands resting calmly on the table. Later, when the children finally fell asleep, the widow remained awake by the fire. She sat quietly, her gaze on the flames, her thoughts heavy. The man noticed her silence. He spoke softly, his voice steady. "You are safe tonight. They will not come back. Not while I am here." She looked at him, her eyes shining with both gratitude and sorrow. "You have done more than I asked. You saved us. You gave my children hope. Why? You owe us nothing." He was silent for a long moment. His eyes were on the fire. When he finally spoke, His words were quiet but full of meaning. I lost much in the war. I lost friends. I lost pieces of myself. When I saw you, I thought it was another wound waiting to happen. But your children, they gave me something I thought I had lost forever. They made me feel human again. Her breath caught. She lowered her head, struggling to hold back tears. No one had spoken to her like that since her husband's death. No one had looked at her as more than a burden. She whispered, "Then perhaps we saved each other." The silence that followed was gentle, filled not with fear, but with peace. The firelight danced on their faces, two strangers no longer bound by chance, but by choice. In the days that followed, their bond grew deeper. The man taught the boy how to hold a hammer, how to mend simple tools. He taught the girl how to light a fire, how to fix a broken toy. Each lesson filled the air with laughter. Each moment built a bridge between them. The widow, too, changed. She no longer bowed her head in shame. She stood taller, her steps lighter. She cooked meals with care, and when she spoke, her voice carried warmth instead of despair. She found herself watching the man when he worked, admiring his strength, his patience, his quiet kindness. And he, in turn, found himself listening to the sound of her laughter, rare but beautiful. He felt his chest stir when her hand brushed his as they passed bowls at the table. What began as survival was becoming something more. A new family was forming, one built not by blood, but by choice. And though danger still lurked in the shadows, inside the walls of their rebuilt shelter, there was light again. The children slept peacefully each night. The widow no longer wept in secret. And the human man, once a stranger, now felt a weight in his heart that was not a burden, but a gift. He had given them safety. They had given him belonging. And together, they had created something rare in a world scarred by war. A home. The stars stretched wide across the night sky. They burned like silver fires above the ruined world, distant and eternal. The valley was quiet now. The hunters were gone. The walls of their shelter stood stronger. And for the first time in many nights, peace had settled over the little family. The widow stood outside the shelter, her hands folded, her face lifted toward the heavens. The firelight from inside glowed faintly on her skin. She looked at the stars as if searching for her lost husband, as if whispering her sorrow one last time before letting it go. Behind her, the children slept soundly. Their small breaths rose and fell in rhythm, no longer broken by fear. Their broken toy rested between them, safe, a symbol of hope rather than despair. The human man stepped outside. His boots pressed softly against the dust. He saw her standing there alone, and for a moment he hesitated. But then he walked closer, his voice quiet but firm. "Could you not sleep?" She shook her head gently. Her eyes did not leave the stars. "When you live in fear too long, silence feels strange. I keep thinking this peace will vanish when I close my eyes." He stood beside her, his gaze also turning upward. The stars reflected in his eyes. His voice was steady. "It will not vanish. Not while I breathe." Her lips trembled. She turned to him, her face touched with moonlight. For a long moment she studied him, as if trying to understand why he had chosen to stay. Her voice softened. "You could have walked away. You could have left us in the ruins. Why did you stay?" The man was silent. His eyes rested on the children through the doorway, then back on her. His answer came slowly, but every word was heavy with truth. "Because I saw life in their eyes. Because I heard your voice and could not ignore it. Because I was tired of walking alone." Her breath caught. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from sorrow but from something deeper, something brighter. She pressed her hand to her chest as if to steady the storm inside her. She whispered, "You gave them a father again. You gave me back my dignity. I can never repay you." He stepped closer. His hand, rough and scarred, reached out. He touched her shoulder gently, not as a claim but as comfort. His voice dropped low. "You owe me nothing. From this day, your burdens are mine. Your children are mine. And you are not a widow anymore. You are my wife." Her knees weakened. She closed her eyes, the tears falling freely now. A sob broke from her lips, not of pain but of release. For months she had carried fear like chains. For months she had hidden her shame. And now, with those words, the chains shattered. She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her, strong and steady. She could hear his heartbeat, slow and firm, a rhythm she could trust. She whispered, her voice trembling but full of promise. "Then I will walk with you. Wherever you go, I will follow. Whatever comes, we will face it together." He held her closer, his voice calm but filled with fire. "And I will protect you. Not because you begged me. Not because of fear. But because you are mine and I am yours." The stars above seemed to burn brighter, as if the heavens themselves bore witness. Inside the shelter, the children stirred. The little boy sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at them standing together and smiled in his half-sleep. His small voice drifted out like a blessing. "Mother is not sad anymore. We have a father now." The girl murmured beside him, still dreaming. "We are safe." The widow pulled away slightly, her face glowing with joy she had not felt in years. She looked into the man's eyes, her voice filled with quiet strength. "You saved us from death. But more than that, you gave us life again." He smiled, rare and genuine. His hand cupped her face, lifting her chin. "No. You saved me. I was only surviving. Now with you I live." Their eyes locked under the vast sky. Two souls from different worlds. Two hearts scarred by war and loss. Yet together, they found love stronger than grief, stronger than fear. The widow leaned into him, and he did not step back. Their embrace was not born of desperation anymore. It was born of choice, of trust, of love. The promise was sealed in silence, under the watch of stars. The galaxy would remember many wars, many tragedies. But in this quiet valley, the story was different. A poor widow, her children, and a human man who chose love over loneliness. And from that night forward, they were not broken, not hunted, not forgotten. They were a family.